With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey. This is a bunch of stuff, deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
Exactly, it is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No, we Irish call it malarkey.
You know what this is? Yeah, and I reserve this word for those rare instances when it's truly deserved. This is malarkey.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
From the King Spring Studios here in Smyrna, Georgia, this is A Bunch of Malarkey. I'm your host, Charlie McMahon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Can't believe this is our 6th episode already. So a month and a half we've been doing this already. So thank you so much for tuning in once again. For the new listeners, thank you. Audience continuing to grow each week. And it's quite encouraging that I'm not sitting here each week talking to myself. I'm looking across the table, and my co-host chair is empty. I was supposed to have a co-host today, but she had a family obligation come up, so perhaps she will be joining us another time. And I know Johnny B will be back from vacation next week, and we have a couple of others lined up, so you're stuck with me again today, folks, but we'll try to make it as entertaining as possible. Speaking of things coming up, hope everybody had a great weekend. My wife and I, it wasn't too eventful. The good news is our dog Bernie, who I spoke about last week, who was in the hospital for 10 days with pancreatitis, came home Wednesday afternoon, and he is getting better by the day. So we were supposed to go out to a potluck type dinner group thing that we do every couple of months last night, but we had to cancel because the dog wasn't ready to be left alone. And that got me thinking that you folks with kids, you've been getting away with this shit for years. I mean, our dog truly is recovering and we couldn't leave him alone, but who's going to argue with that? Like people with kids, all they have to say is my kid's not feeling well, and they get out of anything. You could say, all you have to say is my kid doesn't feel well. Who's going to argue with you when you want to get out of something? And again, it's not like we used the dogs as an excuse last night because we really wanted to go and see our friends, but it made me think that nobody's going to question you. If you have a child and say, my kid's not feeling good, who's going to be a dick and say, oh, come on, let your kid rot at home alone and, come out anyway. So it just made me feel like, even though we don't have children, we have fur children, like, wow, this is pretty cool. Who's going to argue with you? But Bernie is on the mend. He's, I would say he's about 75%. So thank you all for checking in on him over the last couple of weeks. It meant a lot to us. So my thoughts today are with the people in the Carolinas, especially on the coast, as Hurricane Florence heads your way. These weather people, I mean, we've come a long way with radar and things like that, but they still don't know where the hell it's going to hit. It's still a few days away. So if you're in those zones, folks, where they tell you to evacuate as it gets closer, evacuate. Listen to the people. They know what they're talking about. Don't end up on a roof waving an old dirty T-shirt come Friday. If they tell you to get out, get out. It's nothing to mess with, as we've seen in past storms. But every time I hear of a hurricane, now I grew up, as you know, from other episodes, especially from the Flasher episode where my elementary school was, just a stone's throw away from the Great South Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. And I've lived through a few hurricanes myself. In 1976, when I was just a real little kid, Hurricane Belle came through late at night. And there wasn't too much damage. It knocked power out. It was scary at the time as a kid. But a few years later, in 1985, and I'm like Rain Man, I remember the dates. It was September 27th, I believe, of 85. Hurricane Gloria came barreling up the East Coast and made a direct hit on Long Island, where I'm from. And we were without power for 10 days. And it made me think of the preparations my mom and Dad. Now you hear a hurricane, especially when you're 2-3 miles from the ocean. We weren't worried about flooding because it wasn't a Category 5 storm. It was a Category 1 storm, Gloria, but it did a lot of damage on the island. And our storm prep, the storm hit on a Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., and we kind of knew about it a day or two before that we were definitely going to get it. So our storm prep were the usual things that the weathermen would tell you to do, fill your bathtub up with water and certain things like that. But our survival kit, my mom decided we had a cellar. I don't even call it a basement because it was like just made out of concrete and it had all spider webs. It was dirty. You entered from the outside of the house. You pulled this giant door up and you went down these really creepy concrete steps into this cellar, which only had I believe the furnace was down there, and it was one of those little windows, those really tiny windows that are up near the ceiling. So you really couldn't see what the hell was going on outside. So my mom decided that was going to be our storm shelter. And she brought down, we had this old beat up picnic table in the backyard. It was covered in bird shit. It was one of those old wood ones with the 2 benches. So my mom decided to bring the bird shit ridden picnic table down to the cellar with the 2 benches and our survival kit, folks. No, not a first aid kit, not like coolers of rations. Our first aid kit and our storm rations were a box of oatmeal cookies. And I mentioned the name last night. My wife didn't know what the hell I was talking about. They were a brand called Peak Freens. They had a whole jingle about Peak Freens are a serious cookie. YouTube it. You'll know what I'm talking about. So we had a box of oatmeal Peak Freens cookies and a gallon of water and a little transistor radio. So that was our survival kit as Hurricane Gloria barreled over us in 1985. When the storm was over, we came out. There were trees down everywhere, power out for 9 days. It was a total disaster. Price gouging, $15 for bags of ice. It was a pretty bad storm. We were out of school for a couple of weeks, so we lived like pioneers, and it was pretty, it took us a while as a community on Long Island to get back to normal. So then my mom became paranoid about hurricanes. Anytime, because we threw a lot of food out, the power went out, anything in the refrigerator or freezer we had to throw out because it spoiled. So a few years later, I think it was 1991, the weathermen said that we could possibly get hit by a hurricane called Bob. And they said it was going to be similar to Gloria, Category 1 or 2. So my mom got paranoid. She was not going to throw all that food away again. So about 2 days before they thought the storm was going to hit, my mom says, we're not going to throw out all this goddamn food again. She started emptying the freezer out. Now, instead of putting it in an ice chest where we could save the food in case the storm didn't hit or have it on ice and use it as we needed it if the storm did hit, she decided we were going to cook everything up in the freezer and eat it all before the storm hit. So there I am eating fish sticks, frozen pizzas, hamburgers, licking an ice cream cone in one hand. Just a smorgasbord of everything in the freezer that was cooked up and we were forced to eat so it wouldn't spoil. So after having a full stomach and being nauseated by the food combinations I ate, because nothing goes better with a drumstick ice cream cone than a Gorton's fish stick. A few hours later, after we devoured everything in the freezer, we put the news on, and they were happy to say that the storm was blowing out to sea. So we ended up eating the entire freezer for no reason because of the paranoia caused by a previous storm. So listen closely to the news, folks. Don't make your survival kit a box of cookies and water. Get out if they tell you. Just a word of advice from somebody who's been through a few hurricanes. So that's my hurricane, and everyone stay safe, whether it's Carolinas, Virginia, wherever it's going to hit. Just follow the warnings and do what they tell you. So I always start the show off, not with hurricanes, but with some social interactions that I come across at the stores and public places. So I have a couple for you today before we get into today's topic. Now, I don't have children. I've made that very clear in most of the episodes, and I don't have anything against children. But I do have some opinions on parenting and children and stuff that, many people think I shouldn't have because I'm not a parent, which is ridiculous. That's like saying you can't have an opinion on dogs if you're not a dog owner, or you can't have an opinion on anything if you're not that. So anyway, I was in the supermarket. I don't know, I guess it was a couple weeks ago. And there were two women online, not together, separate, in front of me with children. And I guess it's a mom thing where you start talking to each other about your child. And the woman directly in front of me said to the woman in front of her, "Oh, how old is he?" And she said, 27 months. "Oh, great." And she says, "How old is your girl?" 39 months. So I scratched my head for a minute. And I'm thinking to myself, when do we stop measuring kids' ages in months? I would think 2 years old would be the cutoff. You know, you say 23 months and he turns or she turns 2, and then it's over with. So I should have kept my mouth shut, but I didn't. So I yelled out, "He's 3. And a woman turns around and says, "What'd you say?" I said, "He's 3. She says, "No, he's 39 months. I said, "He's 3. She says, "He's more than 3. I said, "He's 3. When he gets to be, if you want to say 3.5, when he gets to 3 years and 6 months, fine, or 4. But folks, come on, when do we stop measuring in months? I mean, that's a legitimate question. So you people who have children, let me know in the comments. When do you stop counting months? When is it 2, 3, 4? I mean, at 5 years old, are you still saying 60 months? I mean, I just thought 39 was excessive. I let the 27 go. The woman who had the 2-year-old and 3 months, or whatever it was. But 39 months? Come on, he's 3. Well, she's 3, whatever. I don't remember, boy or girl. I think it was a girl. She's 3. I don't know. It's things like that. I call them mutants. And mutants is really, I'm referring to people who are like freaks of nature walking around out there. And this is what I have to deal with. So speaking of mutants, this has happened to me on Wednesday. As you know, my dog was sick and in the animal hospital for 10 days. So my wife got the call Wednesday morning from his doctor that he was eligible to come home Wednesday. So my wife called me and said, "Bernie is going to be coming home this afternoon, and we'll go together this afternoon to pick him up. If you don't mind, could you go down to the veterinarian's office?" That's our personal vet, not the hospital, which is 7 minutes from my house, "and pick up this prescription dog food, this case of cans of prescription dog food that the dog needs to be on to help his pancreas and liver and all that heal." So I said, "Sure, I'll go down there." She says, "I'll call the vet and have her get it ready for you. Just go down there and get it." So I hopped in the car and I drove down to the vet. And when I walked in, we know everybody there, all the technicians, the vets, so they knew who I was right away and what I was there for. To my left, now when you walk into this vet's office, you know you're at a vet's office. There's pictures of dogs. There's a giant sign on the front naming the name of the hospital. In the vestibule, there's pictures of dogs and cats. When you walk in, they have like these little phony like fire hydrants, like as a joke where the dog would pee on it, with benches and waiting rooms, and you know you're at a vet's office. It's obvious. So I'm at the counter and they're getting the case of dog food for me. And there's a woman sitting on the bench waiting to see the vet with 2 chihuahuas sitting there. And they're ringing me up, and I asked if I could have a receipt for the dog food because we have the pet insurance, and I wanted to submit the receipt to the pet insurance. So I see these 2 older women come walking in the vet's office. They go through the foyer or the vestibule, whatever you guys call it, and they get behind me on line. Now I have a case of dog food tucked under my arm, and I'm waiting for the printout of the bill, of the receipt. And again, there's a woman sitting with 2 chihuahuas there waiting to see the vet. And there's all like dog products in the front. And, it's a veterinarian's office. It's a very nice one. But in the shopping center, not attached to the vet's office, is like I think it's a Japanese hibachi restaurant, a liquor store, and a couple of sporting goods store. And then attached to the vet's office, 2 separate buildings, is a Starbucks next door. These 2 women come in, maybe in their 60s, and I hear them behind me saying, "What are you going to get?" And the other woman says, "I think I'm going to try that pumpkin spice thing." Here we go with the fucking pumpkin spice again after last week. And I'm saying to myself, these assholes, these mutants must think they're in fucking Starbucks. So I'm listening, and the woman goes, oh, it might be too sweet. I'm going to get the mocha. So the technician who was helping me says, ladies, this isn't Starbucks. They go, it isn't? They go, no, Starbucks is next door. You just have to leave through the front door and go around the building, and the entrance to Starbucks is around. So they thought they were going to cut through the vet's office. So they're walking into the vet's office now, trying to cut through one of the exam rooms, thinking there's some secret Indiana Jones trapdoor to get to the Starbucks. And the tech's yelling, no, ladies, you have to go out the way you came in and around. So I waited for the ladies to leave because I didn't want to insult them to their face, you know, the mutants. So when they left, I said, you know, they didn't. The woman sitting with the chihuahuas didn't say anything, and the tech behind the counter who was taking care of me didn't say anything. I said, you think the big sign with your name on it would give it away? So she starts laughing, and the woman with the chihuahua starts laughing. I go, what's wrong with people? She says, well, we get 4 or 5 people a day coming in here thinking it's Starbucks. Now, it's as clear as day on the front door, above the front. It's a vet. It's an animal doctor. All right, maybe you have a lapse of judgment for a minute and get into the vestibule or the lobby, whatever you call it. But at that point, you should look and say, something's off here. People walking around in lab coats and, I mean, what's wrong with people? What is wrong with people? These are the mutants that we're dealing with every single day. And I'm sitting there with a case of dog food tucked under my arm. Chihuahuas are running around. The girl's in a lab coat. You got flea collars for sale on the counter or whatever the hell they have. And the woman's contemplating whether she's going to get pumpkin spice or mocha or what. Come on, people. And this, again, from dating back from the first episode, this is why I stay home whenever possible. Whenever possible. I know I should probably do more of the errands. My wife does a lot of running around, and I thank her for that. But it's not because I don't like doing the physical errands. It's I don't want to be around people. Because the minute I drive off the driveway, I'm aggravated already. So, I don't know. Maybe I need some medicine or something. But that was the mutant stories for the week. The 39-month-old baby at the store and the Starbucks veterinarian story. So, have you, one more thing before we get into today's topic. Did anyone see or read this story? I mean, this is something right out of Looney Tunes, Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote. I saw it yesterday and I read it to my wife. She couldn't believe it. Then a friend of mine on Facebook messaged the story to me and we got to talking about it. Listen to this story from Bridgeport, Connecticut. A Connecticut woman suffered hand injuries Thursday night after she mistook a quarter stick of dynamite for a candle and lit it in her home, according to multiple reports. Assistant Bridgeport Fire Chief Michael Calderoni told the Associated Press the woman wanted to light a candle at 9:30 p.m. Thursday night after a storm rolled through the area and knocked out the power to her house. She was holding the dynamite when it went off. One of her children called 911, and she was taken to a hospital with serious injuries, according to the Connecticut Post. No other injuries were reported. Authorities told the news a second explosive was found in the woman's home. Officials evacuated the homes next door to the woman's as a precaution and called the bomb squad to remove the device, according to the news station. Authorities continue to investigate. So many questions I have. Number one, what are you doing? What are you doing with a stick of dynamite in the house? And how the hell are you confusing it with a candle? I mean, didn't you see the big Acme? You know, like Wile E. Coyote uses. Isn't there a big Acme emblem on the stick of dynamite? I mean, what next? She's going to blow up the bowling alley thinking one of those big bowling ball bombs is a bowling ball? I mean, who has dynamite in their house? Or if you do, maybe it's in the garage. Maybe it's like an M80, like a quarter stick of dynamite that you have left over from 4th of July. But who's mistaking who's mistaking a stick of dynamite for a candle when power goes out? I mean, I'm laughing. I'm sorry that the woman blew her hand off, but you got to be out of your mind. Like you're fumbling, and you go, "Oh, this looks like a Yankee candle or something," and you just light it. And when the fuse was going off, you didn't say, "Man, shit, this isn't a candle." I don't really understand people. I'm puzzled by the mutants that are out there on a daily basis. So that's going to segue into today's story, because the mutant parade continues. It's another story in the news which is going to bring us to today's topic. And it made national news, but it's a local story to this county and the county next to mine, about a woman who was, for quite a few years, pretending to be a dentist. Opened up offices, was working on people's mouths. I'm going to read you the story. Krista Shevchik was smiling, and she wore makeup, and her hair was real neat in her recent mugshot, but the accusation was the same and just as serious as her last arrest. For the second time in 2 weeks, Shevchik was arrested for allegedly posing as a dentist. The investigation began in Paulding County before moving into neighboring Cobb County, and authorities in both counties warned there could be more charges. Shevchik, 47, has allegedly pulled teeth. Well, anybody could pull a teeth. You could tie somebody's tooth to the door and shut it. So that's not that big of a deal. But she went further than that. She was applying fillings, replacing crowns, writing prescriptions for pain medications. She has no medical license, isn't even a dental hygienist, records show. Early last Thursday, investigators searched her house and her Marietta office in Cobb County. Boxes were removed from the home, and a computer was taken from the county dental provider's office. Cobb County deputies arrested her for driving with an expired tag. So she's not only a fake dentist, but she's driving around with expired tags and licenses or whatever. That's when the deputies saw Shevchik's warrant, and she was booked into jail. She was charged with practicing dentistry without a license, her jail record showed, and she was later released on $5,000 bond. The accused did practice dentistry without a license when she molded, fitted, and installed a crown into the mouth of Sylvia Ferguson, her arrest warrant states. So that's one of her customers that apparently found out she wasn't a dentist. The latest victim told Marietta police that she performed the work between September of 16 and last month. So for 2 years. Now, what I want to know, the warrant stated that, can't you tell the difference between a fake dentist and a real dentist? This woman went back several times, the victim, between 16 and 18, 2016, 2018. And then it dawned on her, maybe this woman's not a real dentist. So, like last week with the Dine and Dash data, and the woman thinks the guy was going to pay her back, I have to say she almost deserves to be treated by, if you can't tell the difference between a real doctor and a fake one, a real plumber and a fake plumber, come on, folks, do some research. So the woman applied teeth, pulled teeth, applied fillings, replaced crowns, wrote prescriptions. She didn't have a license, according to investigators. She sent at least one man to the hospital for emergency surgery to repair the damage done to his mouth. As early as 2012, Shevchik was performing illegal work on the mouths of customers, according to her indictment. She was previously accused as posing as a dentist, according to the Paulding DA's office. But at that time, here's the kicker. Her husband was a sheriff's deputy in Paulding County. So the DA said, it's a conflict of interest to pursue the charges because the husband was a sheriff's deputy. Instead, she was offered a pretrial diversion program. But even though she was warned that she could not legally perform the dental work, she allegedly continued to run her Paulding County business, performed several more dental procedures on patients in their homes and in her office, and complaints continued to come in about her. She later closed that office and reopened a brand new office called County Dental Services in Marietta, Georgia. On the 23rd of August, she was arrested after a Paulding County grand jury indicted her on 48 counts, including 40 counts of practicing dentistry without a license, writing unlawful prescriptions, forgery, and 3 counts of insurance fraud. Since she was arrested, investigators in both counties have received numerous tips from other potential victims. Meanwhile, she's out of jail on bond. So, there's only one person that I can remember ever wanting to be a dentist this bad.
Do you mind telling me what you do want to do?
Well, sir, someday I'd like to be a dentist.
A dentist?
Well, we need one up here. I've been studying. It's fascinating. You've no idea. Molars and bicuspids and incisors.
Now, listen, you. You're an elf, and elves make toys.
And that was Hermie from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the misfit elf who wanted to be a dentist. So this woman apparently, maybe she got inspiration from that old cartoon. I don't know, but Hermie didn't want to be an elf and make toys. He really wanted to be a dentist. Now, you must really... I see this thing two ways. Of course, it's wrong to do what she did because she's not a fucking dentist. And she's putting people's lives and health at risk. But at the same time, you have to really want to do something. Like, be passionate about something in your life if you're willing to open several offices, break every law in the book just to be a dentist. So I don't know if this woman was getting her expertise, quote, from YouTube videos, because nowadays, any problem you have, there's a YouTube video to remedy it. You know, your printer gets jammed, YouTube. Something happens outside, you need to fix the tool, YouTube. So maybe she was taking some YouTube dentistry classes. I don't know. So that made me come up with this week's topic of people we've worked with that are crazy. Because apparently this woman wasn't running her offices alone. She had to have a hygienist working there or some type of office staff. So it made me think about people that I've worked with over the years. And I've worked in retail. I've worked in corporations, private small companies, office settings, every type of setting you could think of. I ran a DJ company for 11 years. I bartended. I've cleaned houses as a side business for myself back in the day. I've pretty much done... I've had a pretty vast... I worked in that parking lot, which my book's coming out in a couple of weeks. So I've done a lot with dealing with the public and dealing with coworkers from every facet of every job I ever had. So it got me thinking with this crazy dentist that, number one, why didn't anybody realize that something was off with this woman that may have worked with her? Because I have like a bullshit radar. I've always had it since I was a kid. I know when someone's bullshitting or pretending to be something or just faking something. And it got me thinking about this fake dentist, about some crazy people that I've worked with. And the first person that comes to mind was from my first job that I ever had. I worked at Herman's World of Sporting Goods. Now, they've been out of business for quite a few years, but it was a fun job. It was a sporting goods store. I worked in the sneaker department. I actually fitted people for sneakers and cleats and rollerblades and all that kind of stuff with that measuring device, people's smelly feet, people coming in without socks. You know, there was good and bad to it. I was a young kid in high school, 16 years old, so it was a job, and I enjoyed it. But there was this guy, Adam, that worked there. He worked back in the hunting and fishing department. Now, Adam was about 6'4" and about 280 pounds. Big guy. Almost looked albino. He had like this really pale skin color and this blonde afro. And he would go around. He drove this Yugo. Remember those cars, Yugo, those small little cars? He stuffed himself into a Yugo. But he would tell us that he was a professional football player. But he didn't play in the NFL. He played in the Canadian Football League for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Now, back then, this was 1988. There was no Google to look up to see if this guy was bullshitting us. So people would say, oh, Adam, that's great. And I was saying to myself, even at 16, 17 years old, this guy's full of shit. Because then he claimed he got injured and he's had to quit playing football. So I was like, outside chance maybe, but this guy's full of shit. So he would just bullshit about stuff like that all the time. So maybe a few months went by, and I think it was the summer of 88, and that band Chicago. Now, we all know Chicago. They've had so many they've had 25, 30 albums. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Great band, long legacy. So many songs. I can't even mention all the songs. But he told us, here it gets better. Now, Chicago is known, they're a rock band, but they're known for their horn section, their great brass section. He told us he played saxophone in the band Chicago. Now, that was the new thing. He played football. Now he was in Chicago, and that they were coming out with a new album, which I was always up on music, and there was a record store right across the mall from the sporting goods store, and I had seen the advertisement for the Chicago album. I'm not sure which whatever Chicago album came out in 1988. So he claimed after work he was going to the studio to work on the final tracks for the album back in 1988. And we were like, okay, but if they're already advertising the album's coming out in a couple of weeks, the album should be finished already. So he said, because a lot of us didn't believe him, that he was going to bring us in a advanced cassette tape of the album in a couple of weeks. Now, thinking to myself, why would he wait a couple of weeks? He said he was going to record it directly from the studio. So we're like, okay. So a couple of weeks later, now the album's already out. He brings everyone a cassette tape in of the Chicago album, the new Chicago album. So now I used to make mixtapes all the time from records. I used to sell them in high school, and I used to make them for my friends. Now, you would, depending on how you made the mixtape, you could copy from one cassette onto another. And it was like an iPod shuffle almost. You made a mixtape with all different songs. And I remember recording from vinyl, and you would hear the needle hit the record, and then it would start playing the music, and you already had the tape going. So sometimes you would hear the crackling of the vinyl. So he brings these tapes in and hands them out, and I bring it home, and I hear him actually putting the needle down on the record and making a cassette tape for everybody. And he's trying to pass it off as he made it in the studio that night with the band Chicago. So it was a big full of shit. We all laughed behind his back. So then one day, Adam just disappeared from work, never called, never showed up for work again. And a few months went by, and my boss at the time, who I was really good friends with for many years after, that would be rain coming down in the background if you hear some weird noises through the microphone, so I apologize for that. We're getting a downburst of rain here. So my boss, on his way into work one day, saw a guy walking along the side of the road in bedroom slippers and a robe with his hair all disheveled. And upon closer inspection, he realized that it was this guy, Adam, just wandering the streets in a robe and slippers. So apparently this guy was out of his mind from the get-go. But I realized this right after the guy started telling these stories. So that's a story about a crazy coworker, one crazy coworker. Now, I had another one. I had many, but there's another one that's worth mentioning. I call her the death recycler. So I started working for a company, I believe it was in 2006, in January. So a few months went by, and in June, one of our dispatcher for the gentlemen in the field, our technicians in the field, quit, and we had to replace her. So the three owners of the company were interviewing people. And they let me sit on a lot of the interviews because I was the purchasing manager and I was the logistics manager. So I had to kind of work in concert with whoever was going to get this job. So this girl, Jenna, comes in. And according to the three bosses, she seemed to be qualified for the job. But there's something that just didn't sit right about her. And I told them that, but they said, listen, we need somebody. She has experience. So she started with the company, and I'll give the owners credit. She seemed to be grasping the job at first. Within 2 weeks, Jenna had called in sick a few times. All right, things happen, even if you're a new employee. Within a month, she had taken about 8 sick days. I mean, that should have been a red flag right there, but the owners said, let her stay, and before you knew it, we were well into July. So now the girl's there 8 weeks. Then on a particular Monday in late July, Jenna called up and said she had an accident over the weekend and that she would be out for a few days. She ended up being out the whole week. So the following Monday, she comes in on crutches with her left foot and ankle wrapped in an ace bandage and her right wrist wrapped in one as well. So now we're all like, okay, she must have really had an accident and been hurt. But then I started getting a little suspicious. My bullshit radar went off. On Tuesday, the crutches just disappeared. So this is a couple of days after the accident. Wednesday, the foot wrap vanished. Thursday, the hand wrap was gone. I also noticed her climb onto a desk to write something on a dry erase board with ease, showing no pain, no sign of distress. But, like everything else, the owner said, let that go too. Then, a couple of weeks later, she started with, my mother is in the hospital, and started taking days off because her mother was in the hospital. And who's going to argue with someone's mother being in the hospital? Just like I said at the beginning. If you have kids and someone has children and they say, my kid's sick, who's going to be an asshole and argue with them? But I was still suspicious of this. So she was taking upwards of 3 to 4 days off a week through August and September. And during that period, she went into one of the owner's offices, hysterical crying that she had no money for food, that she was helping with her mom's medical bills. So he was a nice guy. He gave her $100. Now, folks, if you were broke and someone gave you $100 for food because you were starving, wouldn't you go out to the store and buy a ton of cheap shit like macaroni and cheese and ramen noodles and stock up so you have plenty of food until you get through whatever you need to get through with your mom? No. She went out to the supermarket on a lunch break and bought a huge tray of shrimp. And you know how they have like the price on it? It was $40. And put it in had the balls to bring it in the company into the building and put it in the refrigerator. So I pulled the boss to the side and said, you know that $100 you just gave her? She just went out and bought a $40 fucking tray of shrimp. So he's like, no, come on. I'm telling you, dude, she's a scam artist. So he's like, oh, well, her mother, if she wants the shrimp. Some people are just too blind or they're just too kind. Well, I don't know what it is. So some of these shrimps were like bigger than my shoe. So it's like, you got balls. You got bowling balls hanging between your legs to come in after crying, taking all those days off, begging for money, and they're going out and buying a tray of shrimp that are bigger than my shoe. So the spotty days off continued through September and October. And then on one Friday in, I think it was mid or late October, she showed up at 7:40 in the morning. Now, I was the only person in the building between 7:30 and 8:30 daily. I would open up the building, get the building lights on, deactivate the alarm, get everything ready. So she was doing it at 8:30, but she came in early for whatever reason that day. So she came up to me and engaged me in conversation, small talk, and in passing, she says, my mom died last night. I was shocked and went on my way to show compassion and concern. I got up and I gave her a hug and I said, I'm very sorry. Now, you don't give hugs nowadays in offices, folks. Just steer clear of that. So she worked until 10 a.m. that morning. And then, as soon as the paychecks were handed out, she left. Now, I thought that was strange. She's not in 4 days a week to care for her mom. And then when the mom dies, she shows up for work. Just a coincidence that it was payday. So the weekend goes by, and on Monday, we called her to find out where her mom's funeral was because we wanted to pay our respects because she was a coworker, and we take up a collection and send flowers or something, or for something for her or the family, or send food. A day passes, and she finally calls us back and says, oh, don't bother. The funeral is in New Jersey. Now, this was in New York on Long Island. New Jersey, it was an hour away, in the neighborhood where she grew up. And don't worry about it. And we said, that's okay. We could call like 1-800-FLOWERS. They deliver all across the country. She completely avoided giving us the funeral home name and address. So it was me on the phone. I pressed her on it, and she finally said, in lieu of flowers, please make a donation. And she gave me the name of a church in Glen Cove, New York on Long Island, where her mother was supposedly a parishioner. And she gave me the priest's name. So after I hung up with her, I called the church, and I asked for the priest, and I told him the situation, and he seemed very shocked. And he said, Mr. McMahon, and he named the woman, and I said, yeah, that's her. She passed away last Thursday night, and we want to make a donation to the church in lieu of flowers. He said, Mr. McMahon, I don't know how to tell you this, but this woman died 3 years ago. So this girl, Jenna, recycled her mother's death. Her mother died 3 years before this, but she used an illness for weeks to get away with taking days off that she wanted for sympathy and shrimp and all this other bullshit. And then when she probably got caught wind that she was going to get fired for taking all the days off, she threw in, oh, my mother died, because who's going to fire someone after their mother dies? So the crazy shit that people come up with it's astounding to me. But again, crazy coworker, fake dentist. You got a guy saying he plays football and plays for the band Chicago. So these are some crazy coworker stories, and I'm sure you have them. So the question of the week is going to be, I'm going to read you a couple more. The question of the week is, tell us about the craziest coworker you've ever come across in your career. Doesn't have to be your current job. It could have been a job as a teenager or your last job, or, any job you've had where somebody was just off their rocker. So the best story I have from a job, and I have so many more, but I'm not going to read. We could do another 2-part show about crazy coworkers. And this was right around the Y2K thing. I was working for a technology company, so it was great. I mean, I worked for a technology company where we provided many of the big investment firms on Wall Street with all their computer, hardware, software, and services. We had technicians in the field, and they bought, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was, I should say, millions. We had like $24 million in sales a year over there. And I started out in the warehouse, and after a year, I got promoted into the purchasing department. But being that the company was doing so well, and it was right at that time where the .com thing was booming, and Y2K, and people were buying computers left and right because they thought their computers were going to crash and kill them on the New Year's Eve '99. So when I got promoted into the purchasing department, there was no desk or cubicle for me because we had so many employees there because of the demand of the work. So the owner said, we're going to be converting the warehouse in a few months to a bigger office, and we bought a brand new warehouse down the road, so things are going to get better. So for now, I'm going to get you like an IKEA desk, and we're going to put it right behind this girl, Tina, that worked in the purchasing department. So you two are going to be like kind of cube mates, but your desks will be facing in different directions. But the back of our chairs were like almost touching because that's how close we were all day long. Now, Tina was one of those fake kind of girls that she only cared about guys that made a lot of money and drove fancy cars. So she didn't want to even give me the time of day. Here I was, a 20-something-year-old, just got promoted from working in the warehouse, and she kind of looked down on me like I wasn't good enough for her. But she was very fake and would try to make small talk with me, but you could tell she really had no use for me, which was fine because I don't like fake people anyway. So I had a lot of friends in the company from the warehouse, and my sister actually worked in the company, and my brother-in-law worked in the company, so I didn't need Tina's friendship. So one day, a bunch of us would go to lunch every day over to the mall. They called the Roosevelt Field Mall, which is one of the biggest malls on Long Island. And we went to the food court, and I needed to take out some money to pay for lunch, because back then I don't think everybody was taking debit and credit cards at these little restaurant kiosks and whatnot. So I went to the ATM, and I was waiting for my money to dispense, and I looked down, and I saw, some people take money out and they just leave the receipt behind. Well, someone had left a receipt, and it showed their balance, and it said that they had, after their withdrawal, $214,000 in their checking account. So this always happens to me. Like, I'll see something and a light bulb will go immediately off in my head. I said, I'm going to use this receipt to my advantage. So when I got back to the office, I gathered up a few of my friends and I told them what I was going to do. I said, Tina, as you know, is a gold digger. She doesn't give me the time of day. I'm going to leave this receipt, because she would nose around on my desk and look and see what I was doing on the computer and see what was laying out on my desk, what I was eating. She was very nosy. So I said, I'm going to leave this ATM receipt in clear sight so she thinks I have $214,000 in my checking account. I said, but we're going to take it a step further. I went to my sister and I told her what I was going to do, and she thought it was funny. I said, I'll ring your phone, or in an hour or so, come by and ask to borrow money. Tell me that you need $1,000 because you want to buy your husband a special gift for Christmas and you don't have the money. And I'll play it off like $1,000 is no big deal to me. Sure, I'll give it to you after work. A good friend of mine named Rich, who I used to work in the warehouse with, I told him what I was going to do. Told him in a couple of hours, come by, ask me for a ridiculous amount of money. And I told a couple other people. So I purposely left the ATM receipt on my desk, and we had a couple of watchers from the purchasing department because we were all in on it because nobody really was a big fan of this girl. So I left my desk, and I had spotters over there to let me know when she saw it. So I was at my sister's desk, and then the phone started ringing, and like, she saw it. So I come back to my desk. Now, this girl never really bothered with me. Again, small talk once in a while at best. So I sit down in my seat, and I start doing my afternoon work because we had like 2 waves of orders, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So I started my wave of ordering, purchasing department in the afternoon. And all of a sudden, Tina rolls her chair back and says, oh, hey, Charlie, how's it going today? And I'm like, oh, good, Tina, how are you? She says, I'm heading over to Dunkin' Donuts. Can I get you anything, sweetie? And I'm like, no, I'm good. You sure? You sure I can't get you a coffee or a donut, anything? You sure? And I'm like, no. I'm good, thank you. So she gets up and goes to Dunkin' Donuts. Now, everyone's laughing. So when Tina gets back and sits in her chair, like clockwork, my sister comes by, pretending she's upset. Because this, I believe it was not too far before Christmas. I think it was somewhere in December. My sister comes up to me and says, Charlie, like whispers loudly. So we knew Tina could hear because she was like right, my chair was touching hers. Charlie, I hate to ask you this, but I saw this leather coat that I really want to get, Mike, my husband, for Christmas, but it's really a lot, and I don't have the money right now. Do you think I could borrow? It's $1,200. So I said, sure. I said, do you want cash? I can go to the ATM or the bank, or do you want me to write you a check? My sister's like, whatever works for you. I said, I'll come by your desk in a little while. I'll give you a check. I want to make sure you can get that for him for Christmas. So people are watching Tina, and her eyes are lighting up like she can't believe that I'm just going to give away $1,200 like that. So we wait a little while, and now my friend Rich comes by. And he comes by and says, hey there, McMahon. That's how what he would call me. I need a favor, buddy. I'm totally broke. I've been partying too much, and I have no money for my family for Christmas presents. You think I could borrow a few bucks? I said, how much do you need, Rich? So he jokingly says, like $700. I said, okay, you sure you don't need more? And he's like, could you do $1,000? I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back like a couple $100 a week. There's a lot of overtime right now. So I'm like, yeah, no problem. I said, you want to meet me after work and we'll go to the ATM and I'll give it to you. So he's like, oh, thanks, McMahon. Yeah, I'll see you after work. So now she's getting like, you hear her like adjusting in her seat. She doesn't know what to say. So it must have been eating away at her for the entire afternoon. So right before we left for the day, she turns to me and says, I got to talk to you about something, Charlie. And I'm like, yeah, Tina, what's up? She goes, I don't mean to be nosy or anything, but I couldn't help but notice on your desk something before. And I said, what's that? She says, well, I noticed like a receipt. I said, a receipt? I played dumb. I'm like, oh, my lunch receipt? She said, no. How do I put this? It was an ATM receipt. I said, oh, and then I said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I should have never left that out. She goes, oh, no, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. She goes, I just want to know. I know you were working in the warehouse, and before this job you worked as a manager in retail. I don't know how to ask this, but how did you get so much money? So I said, well, Tina, I've been working since I'm 15 with paper routes and always had a job from when I was a kid. And I just put every penny away, every dime my grandparents ever gave me for my birthday and aunts and uncles. And I just scrimped and saved. Oh, that's so admirable. That is so admirable. I would love to talk more about how you do that. We should get together and talk about it sometime. So now she has a big interest in Charlie, who was a scrubby warehouse worker just a few months ago who she didn't want any part of. So needless to say, I never bothered with her, but I don't think she ever found out that it was a joke. We just let her believe that I had all this money and made her kiss my ass for the rest of the time that I was at the company. I'm not sure if in the end we told her or somebody told her, but I thought it was funny. But these are the nut jobs that we're dealing with at these jobs. So I would love to hear a funny story, maybe a crazy person that you worked with back in the day at one of your jobs, or somebody who just like lost it at work or went crazy. We had a guy one time in the same job. He was this really weird looking redheaded guy, and he was only at the company for a couple of weeks, and I think they fired him, and he threatened to come back and kill everybody. This was back before this was commonplace, so nobody really took him seriously. Now they would have arrested him on the spot, but me and that guy Rich, who I just mentioned, who asked to borrow the phony money, were in the break room one day, and this guy, I don't even remember his name, this redheaded guy, but he comes in with a tray, and we had a coffee machine, and he pours like 8 or 10 cups of coffee, and red hot, steaming hot coffee, and put sugar in each one and milk. So I turned to him, and he worked in the building next door to us. We had 2 buildings where a lot of the technicians worked. So I said to him, it's really nice of you. He goes, what's nice of me? I said, making coffee for everybody and bringing it to them. He goes, these are for me. So we started laughing, and Rich was antagonizing him. That's the personality. Rich said, yeah, what kind of nut job drinks 8 cups of coffee in one sitting? So the guy looks at us with this like look of like death in his eyes, like he was going to kill us, and says, I'll prove it. So we're just staring at him, and he starts guzzling 1 cup after the other of steaming hot coffee. I don't know how this guy didn't like burn his entire mouth or what this guy was on, what kind of drugs, but he downed the 8 or 10 cups of coffee in a row and then stared at us with these like beady eyes and says, you see, I don't lie. So when he walked away, we were like, holy shit, this guy's a psychopath. So like, again, you're going to run into people I once had a woman that I was interviewing for a job. She was running like 15 minutes late, so I was ready to just cancel the interview. I was ready to tell my employees, when this woman shows up, tell her she missed her window for the interview. I was working in retail, I believe. So she shows up for the interview, and the employees call me and say, Charlie, do you want to take this woman? So I was like, all right, I'm not going to be a jerk. Stuff happens, right? So she comes into the office, and she's like all sweaty and says, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I'm late. So I said, is everything okay? I mean, can I do anything for you? Is everything all right? She says, no, my hemorrhoids flared up. My hemorrhoids flared up. So I'm like, thinking to myself, that's a little bit too much information to tell somebody who maybe is going to hire you, maybe is not. So needless to say, this woman didn't get that job. Who's going to tell a potential new boss that you have hemorrhoids and that they flared up, and that's the reason you're late? Make up a story that your kid, like I said, make up a story that your kid is sick, because everybody believes the sick kid stories. I mean, that is the best excuse in the world. You have a kid, like I said before, that's sick. Who's going to question you about a sick kid? So she should have come up with a story like that, like, but she like was in graphic detail about the hemorrhoids, about how they flared up, about the problem she's been having with hemorrhoids. So this is what I had to deal with, folks. So in closing, since our topic today was crazy coworkers, I happen to have a story in my new book, and I know I've been saying it. This is the last story I'm going to read of the book. This will be the 4th one. The book contains close to 50 stories. This is like the 4th one, so I just each week want to give you a little sample of what the book is going to be about. And maybe I'll do a bonus show right before the book release, and a video on Facebook on our Bunch of Malarkey Facebook page to tell you a little bit about the book. But hey, I'm proud of it. It was a lot of work, and I had a lot of help. My wife with the editing, and a friend of ours editing, and our graphic designer was great. It was a lot of work, folks. So when you write a book, I mean, the writing was actually the easy part. It was all the stuff that came after it. So you hope that it's not like setting up for a garage sale where you do months of work and you make $40. So I'm going to shamelessly promote the book wherever I can. But I think if you like this podcast and 6 stories like this, I think you'll enjoy the book. It's about my 2.5 years running a parking lot near the courthouses in a suburban Atlanta town. And hear me with my New York accent and, you know, my personality trying to mesh with people who, you know, had the Yankee go home kind of mentality and just crazy people. And that's what this book is all about. So in the spirit of crazy coworkers, I want to read a story where I actually saved the courthouses from hiring a crazy woman. This is in my book. And the name of the story is called The Intercepted Interview. So there are lots of life rules out there that many people follow, such as be comfortable in your own skin, drop the resentment within, appreciate what you have, and don't compare yourself to others. But much bigger than that, than a life rule is the golden rule. And we know what the golden rule is, folks. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat people the way you would like to be treated, in other words. It's pretty simple, right? We should all try to follow that, whether they're mutants or not. Everybody deserves to be treated the way you'd like to be treated, unless they're total mutants. Then I give you permission to unload on them. Anyway, at the parking lot, I always treated everyone with respect and offered a nice greeting and a willingness to help, no matter how stupid the question or the person was. I went above and beyond my job description on a daily basis to ensure that the parking lot was a welcoming place for everyone. After all, many arrived there headed to court and was already stressed out about what they may face when they headed into those courtroom doors. I kept that in mind and went out of my way to be polite and even lent an ear when they wanted to vent about their situation. Many of my repeat customers commented on my demeanor and willingness to help. I was a good actor. I was always in a bad mood because of the working conditions, lack of help, lack of owner involvement, and the 20% or so of the customers who were just flat out rude and confrontational. Hey man, that's where I drew the line. I took no shit from anyone and gave it back just as hard, if not harder, than they gave it to me. After all, I didn't answer to anybody. The owners weren't involved, and frankly, they weren't interested in all the confrontations that took place on a daily basis. The pile of cash at the end of the day was their only concern. So I ran things my way. On a very, very busy rainy Tuesday morning around 10:05 a.m., a woman pulled into the lot while chatting it up on her cell phone. She proceeded to run over the cones I had placed in the parking spot next to my booth. She honked her horn in one long, steady, and obnoxious honk while waving her credit card out the driver's side window. I ignored her. This is not how the system worked. There was no drive-through service at the lot. It was up to the customer to find an available, not a coned-off parking space, and then come up to the payment booth, where I was, to pay. The incessant honking went on for several more minutes until she realized it was getting her nowhere. Then she decided to come up to the booth while still in deep conversation with someone on her phone. I call her the intolerable interviewee. She says to me, "Didn't you hear me honking?" Yes, ma'am, but we don't process payments at vehicles. Oh, and you ran over 2 traffic cones as well. What cones? The ones wedged under your car? Now she's telling the person on the phone, "Hold on." Now she turns to me and says, "It's fucking raining. I have an interview. You could have come out to help me. What the fuck do they pay you for?" Ma'am, that's not how it works. I can't leave my post. There's money in here, and I don't have a portable credit card machine to process your payment at the car. She says, "Just take the card and do your job. Can't believe exceptions aren't made in the motherfucking rain. Now I'm going to be wet for my interview." So I turn to her and sarcastically say, "Hey, ma'am, did you ever hear of an umbrella?" She turns and says, "I have an umbrella in the car." A lot of good it's doing you, ma'am. You're fucking rude. Just run the goddamn card and do your job. Ma'am, I'm only rude to people who show no respect and think they're entitled to something. So the intolerable interviewee resumed her phone conversation. I was processing her credit card payment. She ranted about me, asking her cell phone buddy, "Can you believe this asshole that works here? Did you hear that shit? What kind of service is this?" She went on to tell that person on the phone that she had a job interview at the probate court at 10:30 a.m. She even mentioned who she would be interviewing with. Now I turn to her and say, "Thank you, ma'am. Good luck on your interview. Don't forget your umbrella." She says to me, "I should have you fired for making me come out in the motherfucking rain." I ignored the very wet, intolerable interviewee and watched her as she sloshed back to her vehicle. She sat in her car for a few more minutes and continued to chat it up on the phone very loudly, still ranting about the service she felt she was entitled to from me. Then it hit me. I had her name from the credit card slip. I knew where she was interviewing and who she was interviewing with. I couldn't let this information go to waste. I pulled up the court directory on my laptop, and bingo, I found the interviewer's name. I picked up the outdated landline phone, dialed star 67 to block the number from being seen on caller ID, and dialed the number. Now, this isn't, I used a fake name person in the court to protect identity here. Woman answers the phone. "Mrs. Mary Jones speaking. How may I help you?" Hi, yes, Mrs. Jones. Do you have a Lisa Smith coming in at 10:30 for an interview today? I really can't give out that information, sir. May I ask who you are? Mrs. Jones, I'm a concerned citizen. Can I ask you what you need or what this is in reference to, sir? Well, it's in reference to Lisa Smith, who's coming in to interview you in a few minutes. I would really think twice about hiring her. Sir, I can't confirm that I have an interview with Lisa Smith, but if I did, can I ask you why I shouldn't hire her? Of course. Lisa has a very difficult time exercising common courtesy. She has an entitled mentality, thinks she's better than everyone, talks down to people, shows no respect, and is not fit to deal with the general public. And what a filthy mouth that Lisa has. I just want to save you the time and the trouble, Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones says, "Can I ask how long you've known her?" "Long enough, Mrs. Jones, long enough. Take my word for it. Lisa Smith is more drama than in episodes of Real Housewives. Spare yourself." Now she's laughing. "Okay, sir, well, thank you for the heads up. I'll keep this in mind. Mrs. Jones, I'm just looking out for you and the court system. You don't need her ass parked in your office each day. You'll go insane." "Well, sir, you have a great day, and thanks for the information." "You too, Mrs. Jones. Have a great day." It was now approaching 10:20, and the intolerable interviewee, now with umbrella in hand, jumped puddles over to the courthouse for her now tainted interview. I did my part. The rest was up to Mrs. Jones inside that courthouse. A few short minutes later, at 10:28, I saw the intolerable interviewee heading back towards her vehicle. I thought to myself, how could an interview be finished 2 minutes before it was even scheduled to start at 10:30? Did she forget something in the car? Of course, the intolerable interviewee was back on the phone spilling the beans about what just happened inside. Quote, "Why the fuck did they make me come all the way here if the position was already filled? Waste of my fucking day." Then she paused. Yeah, they said they forgot to call and cancel. Unfucking believable, end quote. The intolerable interviewee, still ranting on her cell phone, backed out over the traffic cones and headed out of sight. For that one rainy morning, me and Mrs. Jones, we had a thing going on. And that was to teach the intolerable interviewee the golden rule. So that's my... See, all heroes don't wear capes, folks. I felt I did my civic duty to the courts. This woman, she wasn't going to be fit to deal with the public, so I figured I couldn't waste that information. I had her name. She had a big mouth telling the person on the phone who she would be interviewing with, where and when. So I used it to my advantage, and needless to say, she did not get that job. So I saved someone else from a crazy coworker story that was bound to happen if this woman got that job. So that is going to wrap up the show. Make sure you comment on our Facebook page. The link for this show will be posted. And we'd like to hear your crazy coworker story. I always love the comments, and I love the interactions that you guys do. Find us on Facebook, Find us on Twitter at Malarkey Pod Show. And you can stream us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Libsyn, and where your favorite podcasts are hosted. So once again, we thank you. And if you could, reviews are always welcome on our Facebook page and especially on iTunes. So if you have an iTunes account, go over to the A Bunch of Malarkey page and send us a great review. And that would be much appreciated as we continue to grow our audience. And we're going to be doing some different things in the next few weeks. I've got some things working on rather than just posting on Facebook what's going to be coming up. We're going to be doing some video interaction. We may even do some live podcasts where it'll also be available on all the platforms that you're currently getting them on. But we may do some Facebook Live feeds of the show as it happens. As we're taping it, so you'll get to see our little studio here, and so we have got some fresh new things in the works as well. So I can't believe this is our 6th episode and how much the audience is growing. But before I go, the podcast community is, it's a vast one, but we're all starting to talk on different platforms and websites and stuff. So I wanted to give a shout out to a podcast. Now, even before I started doing these podcasts, I wasn't really that knowledgeable in podcasts, but I'm starting to get into other ones. And just like you guys listen to mine, I'm starting to listen to other people. So I want to give a shout out to a podcast. They're on their 3rd episode. It's funny. I think you'll enjoy it. See, in life, you don't think of everybody as your competition, folks. If something else is good, you refer it. You help other people out and vice versa. So I want you guys to check out Random Acts of Conversation on iTunes. They also have a Facebook page. It's a podcast. They have 3 episodes available. The first one's called Small Talk. Second one is Pet Peeves. And then they have episode 3. So check them out if you can. Again, we all help each other. We're not, we all stand on our own merit, so we're not going to discourage you from listening to other podcasts. So check them out. I don't think you'll be sorry for doing that. So that's going to wrap it up. I really can't express my appreciation to everyone who tunes in on a weekly basis, all of our new followers on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. So I appreciate it. So as I always say, folks, and it could never be more true, beware. It's a shit show out there. Thanks for listening. This has been A Bunch of Malarkey.